On today's World Insight, dilemma over transatlantic ties with relations between the European Union and the U.S. strained over tariffs and security threats. So what's next for the EU? The best way forward? Answers from Fredrik Reinfeldt, the former European Council president who used to be the Swedish Prime Minister.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Though the huge tariff on the EU has been put on hold after a phone call between the US President Donald Trump and his European counterpart, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Sunday, the rift across the Atlantic doesn't seem likely to go away anytime soon. The US is one of EU's major trade and investment partners, while the EU is considered a long-time standing US ally. The tariff threats have resulted in some voices proposing higher tariffs against the United States by the EU for self-protection. Earlier this year, during the Munich Security Conference, a speech by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance was seen as a clear signal of the division between the two parts across the Atlantic. Recently, I sat down with Fredrik Reinfeldt, former president of the European Council and former Prime Minister of Sweden. Here is more about his views toward the relations across the Atlantic. Mr. Prime Minister, so good to see you.
Same, thank you.
What do you make as a seasoned politician of the nature of transition we are going through right now in the world?
Well, to summarize, it's the wrong direction. It's too much of a belief in strong power, of trying to reach out one's interest and one's might into neighboring countries. We have very much of this in Europe. And since I come from a small or medium-sized, very open economy, we are very unhappy with this. We believe in more friendly, more rules-based, more close cooperation way forward for mankind. So we think these are threatening times. We are very worried about a lot of the signals we see in the world.
Rules of the jungle seem to be the dominating phenomenon, is it?
Yeah, that's a correct description. It's a kind of belief in this strongman concept that we need very, very authoritarian leaders to guide us. And since that's not our experience in Europe that much, we've had this in our history. In the case of Sweden, very far distant history, but all the same, we have learned another direction which we think works well for us and is definitely more friendly.
Even among the earlier allies, such as the cross-Atlantic relationship.
Oh, absolutely. It's a shocking shift that we have seen in the White House with Donald Trump coming in, mocking and bullying old friends in Europe. This is not the direction we would like to see in Europe. We do not agree to this concept that we should be against interest of the United States or something like that. On the contrary, we have built a close cooperation over the Atlantic Ocean, which brings us back to Second World War. So this is an enormous shift in policy coming from the United States.
The quote-unquote tariff war has been a gigantic stress test to the world so far. As a result of the past few weeks of tariff war, how much have we learned? What have we learned, do you think?
Well, first of all, it's confusing that it's declared to come tariffs at very high level, that is then taken away for 90 days. And
if it were 90 days, as described.
If it were 90 days, absolutely. We know from experience that it takes years to actually conclude a free trade agreement that deep enough to really make a difference. To refer to 90 days is not serious if you mean a full-fledged trade agreement. So we, of course, say no, shouldn't be these kind of tariffs. We also think they are wrongly described. We see this as a kind of a taxation of your own citizens. It's a kind of putting a tax on consumption on the people of United States. And it's described differently. We don't believe that. We had these ideas in Sweden. They were very popular 300 years ago, but we moved away to say it doesn't really work. It's much better to have economy of scales, open trade, to make countries actually develop what they are best at. And then after that, dealing and trading with each other. That's the creation of wealth in the world. So we really dislike this. But so what have we learned? Well, we have learned that we need to understand that the US administration seems to be seeking a way forward, which is either deal making, still believing in these tariffs, but it's very uncertain. No one really knows what's the end game of this as long as Donald Trump is president.
And as a result, what would it mean in terms of Europe trying to seek its solution of making sure the tariff will have the least impact on the European economies?
Well, I agree with those who say that Europe should not make the mistake to raise their own tariffs. But as you know, in Europe, there are voices saying we should. So that's typical. But I would say the right pathway, and that's also what Commission are now saying, let's push on with free trade agreements with Mercosur, which is now actually finalized, with India, trying to make with parts of the world who are actually trying to go in a different direction from this. That's the way forward. And also to deepen, as I said, the de facto trade inside Europe, because that's not open to full-fledged open trade, because we also have still a lot of, well, not tariffs, but we have a lot of things, objectives that also annoys, disturbs the trade inside Europe.
We have seen the rules of the jungles and the divide and conquer strategy coming out of the current administration in Washington. And yet, one has to notice, and I'm sure everybody does, that China was the only country since the tariff war against the rest of the world started by Washington to retaliate against the United States with the possibility of being retaliated back and being quote unquote punished, which eventually actually was the case. But the latest discussion in Geneva with a joint statement between the current White House and also the Chinese side seemed to suggest some very interesting things to the rest of the world as well. So what does that say to our European friends these days who did not retaliate, just try to wait it out?
I think you know that the discussion, all this went very quickly. And of course, the tariff level directed towards China became higher than the ones put on Europe. So I mean, this was done in hours, a couple of days. There were preparations of retaliation.
But is it about the numbers or is it about the principles?
Oh, no, that was, of course, more about the numbers. I mean, when it comes to the principle, we deeply dislike this idea of tariffs building world trade. We disbelieve that. We think these are 300-year-old ideas already proven not to work. So, but I think the importance is to say that, as you know, European Commission was actually preparing retaliation, but it was never come into place because then came this, let's put it on hold for 90 days. And to be very honest, we actually don't know where this will end. This is still open. It's still an open discussion. I saw this idea that UK and United States made a trade deal, but the question is, as I mentioned earlier, it's too quick. It's not deep enough, and it's much tougher to de facto create open rules-based trade than what you could achieve during 10, 30, even 90 days.
But this is already 2.0, isn't it? Is Europe ready for this?
It's been a very turbulent start of this year, but I would definitely sign up to that. Europe now is coming together, focusing on creating a stronger Europe based on deeper cooperation in Europe, and those part in the world who would like take care of a rules-based cooperation together with Europe, and not to be as reliant as we have been on the United States. That's what you see. All these meetings now in Europe, all these getting together is actually pointing in that direction.
We see earlier a discussion among the European leaders more with the theme of ideology and the cross-Atlantic as well. But now when real interests coming in, I mean concrete ones that you can see, for example, trade, things are getting much more complicated. So what do you think, even though the Europeans would love to talk about values, especially among the politicians in their presentations, but eventually how capitals are looking for the common interest through Europe? And at the time when you have real interest, silver and gold being counted by every economy, what is the way to rallying the spirit of Europe?
The way market economy and society is built in Europe, we try, I'm not saying that we always succeed, but we try to keep a close or a clear barrier between government politics on one side and business community and companies on the other side. Not everywhere, not perfect.
But it's not just business, it's jobs.
Yeah, it's jobs, absolutely. The job creation.
It's also the betterment of life for the common folks, isn't it?
Absolutely. We that's kind of the multipolar society, the open society, you could say, that allows people free speech, free movement, and all of this. I totally agree. But the discussion we have in Europe is, of course, that moving in from the Trump administration, pushing companies that are present in Europe to follow the way of the Trump administration. They're even sending letters and telling us what to do in Europe based on what the Trump administration thinks. And that goes in clinch with the view of Europe. That's not what we believe we would like to see for how we interact between governments and business life. So it's absolutely a ideological crash where we are trying to say, no, we want to have a clear division between these. And we think that's a better way of creating jobs, giving space to entrepreneurs actually to grow their different companies.
But there's also criticism toward the policies these days taken by the European Union. For example, industrial policy, for example, tariffs against the products that are competitive in the European market coming from outside, reflected by green products, just one of those many examples, AI as well, semiconductors too. So how do you see these kind of approaches seems to be adopted worldwide, and how much capital does Europe, if I could once again use that general term, still have in terms of criticizing the others?
You could clearly see that there are different views in Europe. Some, and that's what you refer to, say that with this kind of state capitalism from China or even America First policies coming from the United States, they say we need to protect ourselves. We also need to put up tariffs or barriers towards what we feel is unfair competition, coming in with lowering of prices linked to subsidies given from states from other parts of the world. And then they say, let's put up these barriers. And therefore, we also then, in part of Europe, as you say, create protectionism, even though the internal market in Europe theoretically is said to be of the opposite. But there are also other forces, and you referred to discussions with the United Kingdom and so on, who would now say, no, now is the time to go in the other direction. Let's make free trade agreements. Let's bring down the level of tariffs. And exactly as you say, this is still an open discussion, open debate. And I would say we would be very open to anyone in the world ready to lower tariffs or take away the kind of unfair competition that we feel come from different parts, also from China.
How is Europe likely to make its balance, do you think, sir? While at the same time be able to protect its interests, particularly trade and economic interest, while speaking true to the principles that you earlier suggested that Europe has been hold on for quite a long time and be proud of it?
As you know, we have had reports from former Prime Minister Draghi and then Letta here, both from Italy, who is saying basically that if Europe is to compete in this new world, you need to invest a lot when it comes to competitiveness, when it comes to education, when it comes to infrastructure. They presented a long list. The question, of course, is given that we are many sovereign nation states, how do you do that together? That's the work we are actually trying to finalize or find a way forward for Europe. But at least it's very clear to European citizens and politicians that this is something we need to address. If it comes out in a better direction, I hope so. I think the new Commission inside European Union is more clear of this pathway. Now we need to adhere more to this kind of competitiveness and being at the edge of different areas where we are losing when it comes to competitiveness, both towards the United States and China.
Mr. Prime Minister, you were in the office for a very long time, and it was the time when globalization, it has really proved itself to be successful and bringing better results for almost everyone in the world. How do you and your generation of politicians digest, in retrospect, that period, and also in comparison to what is going on in politics these days?
I think that absolutely correct in the description. What we saw was a growing middle class all over the world, counting in billions of people, especially in China, I would say. It's a fantastic transformation when it comes to wealth and well-being inside China. But this is seen all over the world, also in my country. That was done through
and
this.
Consumers benefited as a result of
Exactly. Absolutely so. What has it shifted towards? Well, to be very frank, this new world order makes a very little portion of mankind richer. It's a kind of richness of the few rather than building the wealth and the well-being of the many. And that's my criticism of this, because it's a kind of more corrupt, more authoritarian, more pushing resources to a few. And I think that's the wrong way forward, because basically we have the means and we know how to create a world where gradually all of mankind gets better conditions. And I mean, exactly as you said, going back 10, 15 years, 20 years in time, we saw that we pushed back poverty. We pushed back a lot of the global problems we saw. And now we have had backlash for some years. But again, this could shift. We could go back or go forward, as you always should do, based on more openness, more trade to create this better conditions again.
But on the other hand, Mr. Prime Minister, we also see a rising tide of propaganda surrounding the latest changes. For example, glorify populism. For example, glorify and beautify some of the narrow national interest into ideology. So how do you see this new phenomenon now? how conscious we should be, as we already learned a lesson from the last round?
We have a lot of discussion of respecting science, respecting facts. We talk in our schools with children to be more critical towards what they are presented. Who is saying this? Who gains from this description? And what is facts that differs from propaganda? That's talk we are having with our children. We understand that it's very much different from when I was young, the way they meet information and propaganda in our time. And we are only at the beginning of these discussions because we understand we can't backwards on technology, but we need then to understand what this new technology, what it does concerning as exactly what you say, facts, science, information.
Let's talk about China. Now, there are a lot of moving factors as we speak. The latest tariff war is one of those. Through that mirror, many people see the world very differently, just compared to 2 months ago. Whether this talk about geopolitics or economic potential, or the issues of dollar and how countries can work together, who can be closer to one another. All these are moving factors. Where is China to you?
Well, China is, of course, the main target for a lot of the criticism coming out of the United States. It's a kind of threat they feel, the way they also felt with Japan going back in the 1970s. And of course, it relates to the fact that China is much more strong economically and politically now than they've been during my lifetime. But we do not really see it exactly the same way here in Europe. We understand that we tend to move towards a kind of multipolar, regionally based world order, which worries us because we have a neighbor called Russia who are very, very dominant and trying, especially when it comes to security, trying to dominate also neighboring countries, which is, of course, very worrying to us here in Europe. So we would like to see much less tensions among these bigger players. And we follow very clearly or closely what China now are saying. Because on the one hand, China says we do not want these tariffs. We want more rules-based trading. And that's also in the interest of Europe. And we definitely feel that we do not find the same level playing field when it comes to our cooperation between China and Europe. And to be very frank, China is now, with the technological advantage that China now has, a lot of this is actually falling out in the direction of China being the stronger part. So we have a little bit hard to understand why all the kind of protectionism we still feel also comes out of China. So these are questions we would like to discuss with our Chinese counterparts.
As a diligent observer of the world, including about China, I'm sure, Mr. Prime Minister, you have noticed some recent measures taken by the Chinese side. For example, about the private businesses, there has been a new law on the private business promotion. Meanwhile, you also see a tremendous amount of efforts being made to attract the foreign investment and the foreign businesses into China. And at the same time, reaching out by the top Chinese leadership as we speak. The Chinese President Xi Jinping just made 2 phone calls with his European counterparts, French President and the newly elected Chancellor of Germany. So to you, how would you read it? And what does that mean for the thinking process of Europe?
Well, we need trading partners that also believe in a world without tariffs, more rules-based and more with a level playing field. And we also see and hear about these signals from China and from other parts of the world, I will say. What's possible? How far will this go when it comes to if you look at it with European eyes, liberalizing actually how it is possible to be present in China. And I'm speaking, of course, to Swedish industry and industrial leaders if they feel the same, because I mean, a lot of them are already present in China. So
yes, they're very active, by the way, sir.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
news.
So I can clearly say we are open to business and open to discussion. So we follow this very closely because at the end of the day, it's about the kind of cost level and level of bureaucracy and level of marginals you can get out of actually acting as an investor in another country. That at the end of the day will show the direction.
Mr. Prime Minister, you are a bridge builder. From the earlier traveler to now at the turbulent time, trying to go between many different factors, try to create consensus. But now we know during the sunny days, there are a lot of bridge builders, self-claimed.
Yeah.
During the rainy days, when you have much pressure on the shoulders of the bridge builders, the numbers are much fewer. Can you share with us some inspirational thoughts you have about how to be a responsible and sustainable bridge builder?
I think to me it's very easy. Either you listen to those who say, if you're not like me, if you don't think like me, if you don't look like me, then I need to block or boycott or say that you are a threat. That's have been very much the way of the world the latest 10 years. In dispute of that, I would regard it differently. I would say that differences should be met with curiosity, being met with being a little bit more humble, learn more about what is not yourself, what is not exactly with the same views as yourself, to try to show respect and also kind of a more friendly way of interacting with each other. That doesn't mean that you are not allowed to be critical or say that, well, there are limits to what we accept, and that could work both ways. To me, this has been a way of looking at the world, looking at other people, which makes me then a bridge builder. And that's exactly as you say, on a rainy day or rainy years as we have had, the world needs them.
That's my latest interview with former Prime Minister of Sweden, who is also the former President of the European Council. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insider. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.